You are such a good woman, a true mother of many children, and of course, you are a very courageous woman if you decided to have so many children," Natalie, a playground buddy, respectfully said to Gina. "Thank you," Gina replied with embarrassment. "But, it's just that I grew up in an orphanage myself. I never knew my parents, and I always dreamed of having a large family. So I'm trying to give as many kids a home as possible. By the way, they're not all mine." "Really?" Natalie marvelled. "Yes, 3 of them we adopted. They were orphaned after my best friend died." Gina nodded sadly. "How awful! What happened to her?" "She died with her husband in an accident," Gina answered and sighed heavily. "How unfair it is sometimes," Natalie exclaimed, placing her palm on her lips. "It's such a pity that tragedies like this happen to good people." "Yes, that's really unfair. My friend Holly was a good woman." The 2 women fell silent, keeping an eye on the little ones frolicking in the playground. "And the others? Are they yours?" Natalie cautiously continued. "Yes, I gave birth to twins in my marriage. So it turns out 5 flowers of life are growing. This is a whole bouquet." "Your husband is a good man, I guess. How does he cope with such a load?" Natalie kept wondering. "No," Gina smiled sadly. "He couldn't handle all the chaos. Our own twins were already a handful, and my friend's kids were too much for him." "Have the arguments started?" Natalie asked regretfully. "Yes. Michael became nervous and angry. He shouted at me and the children constantly. He insulted us and reproached me for being on maternity leave and not working. He accused me that there wasn't enough money in the family and that all my attention belonged only to the children and not to him." "Why did he say that? Didn't he realize how hard it is to raise 5 little kids? Why didn't he help you?" He didn't even mind at first. He agreed to adopt Holly's kids without arguing. But then, when he actually faced it, he realized that he couldn't handle such a burden. Gina replied quietly, "So, did you get divorced?" "Unfortunately, it happened. Michael abandoned us. And not just abandoned, but went to a rich mistress." "How could he do that? He's a scoundrel." Natalie was outraged. "She's rich, a little older than him, but with a well-established business, which lacks a man's hand. He told me all this when he came to get his stuff. He bragged. How could I miss such a chance?" "Why did he do that to you? Couldn't he just walk away quietly?" Natalie shook her head pitifully. "I don't know whether he wanted to hurt me or justify it to himself. It was too hard for me to think about the details. My heart and soul were shattered. Only the kids kept me from losing my mind. I had to hold myself together to not fall apart." "Mum," Natalie's son ran up to the bench. "Let's have an ice cream." "Okay, Sonny," said the woman, searching through her bag. "Here, go to the store and buy it." The little boy tucked the bill into his pocket and happily ran off to make the purchase. Watching him, Gina let out a heavy sigh. "Shh, don't make a fuss," came the whisper of her eldest daughter. "Mummy doesn't have any money right now. We can do without ice cream. It's just unnecessary stuff." 3 snub-nosed, white-haired boys and the little girl with red curls gathered around Elaine, their older sister, and began to whine in frustration. But the girl only hushed them, sending them off to play in the sandbox again. Witnessing this, Gina could barely hold back her tears that threatened to burst forth. After her husband left her, she found herself starting from scratch, struggling to make ends meet with the pitiful allowance provided by the state to pay bills and buy groceries. The older daughter, Elaine, understood everything, but it was much harder to explain to the younger ones why they had to share clothes and go without sweets. Taking care of 5 people on your own is a lot of work, no matter what anyone says. Natalie shook her head. "I don't know how to manage with just one, and this one would probably be the ultimate challenge." "Nothing. We're all together, that's the main thing, Gina replied, her voice trembling. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I heard you were assigned a house? Yeah, we live right here, practically in the suburbs. Gina fell silent again, remembering the run-down house they received from the state. It had never been repaired. The walls were cracked, the ceiling was covered in decades-old whitewash, and the roof leaked mercilessly at the slightest rain. And how do you live there? Natalie smiled. Must be nice, with the fresh air, huh? Not bad, Gina replied, holding back a sob. The first time she saw the housing, Gina was horrified. How is it possible to live here? But it was unnecessary to tell about all the hardships to a stranger. After all, Gina didn't want to look too pathetic, making Natalie show more compassion than she already did. Mum, do you have a handkerchief? Elaine asked, approaching Gina. Igor has a runny nose again. Here you go. Gina smiled guiltily at her daughter. Oh, we have colds all the time too. It's normal at their age, don't worry. Natalie's tried to encourage. Yeah, I guess. Elaine shrugged and ran to her brother. In fact, the younger kids were periodically sick with colds because of the bad environment at home. Endless medicines drained a considerable amount of money that could have been spent on repairs. Without repairs, kids' colds continued with enviable regularity. It was a vicious circle. Elaine, gather the little ones. It's time to go home, shouted Gina. Leaving already? Asked Natalie. Yeah, I still have an interview to go to today. I want to try and get a part-time job. Who's going to look after the kids? Wondered Natalie. Our neighbour, Mrs. Goldstein. She is a holy woman, smiled Gina. It won't be bad for us, but she helps all the time. She substitutes for me when I need to run errands in town. She has no grandchildren. Her son died, God rest his soul. She says she enjoys taking care of the little ones. Wow, how does she manage so many kids? She's used to it. She used to work in a kindergarten, but now she's retired. So she gravitates towards the kids, just to find some happiness and meaning of life. A noisy group led by Elaine ran up to Gina, chattering away. That's it, let's go home. Mrs. Goldstein is already waiting for us, she said with feigned severity. Goodbye, shouted Natalie after them. Goodbye, squeaked the children in unison, waving their hands. Oh, well, I've been waiting for you. Come into the living room. We'll have tea now, Mrs. Goldstein greeted the guests. As soon as the front door of the apartment opened, the noisy crowd rushed in, almost knocking the elderly hostess off her feet. Don't run around the apartment, Elaine scolded them. Let them, waved the elderly woman. Thank you, Mrs. Goldstein. You are our saviour. I will be forever indebted for your help, said Gina with gratitude. Oh, it's nothing, smiled the elderly woman. Elaine, dear, go look after the little ones. We need to talk to Mum. Waiting until the eldest girl disappeared into the room, Mrs. Goldstein motioned for Gina to lean closer. Gina, that inspector from Social Security came by. He says they have a suspicion that you're not taking good care of your children. Oh, they've come to you already. I know about their suspicion. They sent me a letter. It says they'll probably take them all to an orphanage, Gina said bitterly. Those scoundrels! What are we supposed to do? Mrs. Goldstein shook her fist at nothing. I'm going to get a job. I need to improve my financial situation urgently. Listen, dear, you have such a good voice. Maybe try to be a singer, unexpectedly suggested the neighbour. Gina thought about it. Back in the orphanage, she often took part in various competitions and won them, easily surpassing her opponents. All the teachers prophesied a good future in the world of music, but it turned out that getting on stage without connections was very difficult. My train has already gone, Mrs. Goldstein, Gina said tiredly. I haven't sung in a long time. As soon as I got married, I tied myself up with all the household chores, and stopped singing at all. It's just like muscles. You have to practice all the time. Think about it, my darling. Think about it and practice. I'll help you with the kids. Just find the right path for you. Gina promised to think about it. Then, leaving the children with her neighbour, went to the interview. So, what position are you applying for in our restaurant? The manager, Lawrence, looked at Gina, tapping a simple rhythm with a pen on the tabletop. Did your ad say that you needed someone to wash the dishes? She answered timidly. Yeah, but you realise it's hard work, right? And you won't run away on the first day, will you? Of course not. I have 5 kids to support. I don't have many choices. Good. Then you can start. Already? She was surprised by the haste. Do you have any reservations? The manager raised an eyebrow sceptically. No, not at all. The kitchen turned out to be a cramped and hot room, making it very stuffy. Gina was provided with a simple apron and gloves, and then escorted to a sink full of plates. Well, why are you standing there? There's plenty of work to do, shouted the manager, urging her on. I'm sorry, Gina squeaked, scurrying over to the sink. Apparently such treatment was the norm, as none of the employees even thought to resent it. Gina got to work listening intently to the surrounding conversations. How will our musicians cope now? Came from one of the cooks. It's fine, we still have live music, and we'll use recorded vocals. It's not a big deal. Besides, I'm pretty certain that our clients don't care about what to listen while they eat, replied his companion. Excuse me, what happened to the singer? Gina voiced from her corner. The cooks looked at each other, deciding whether it was worth discussing the restaurant's internal problems with a newcomer. Yes, she got pregnant. She's on maternity leave. We haven't found a replacement yet. One of the cooks waved his hand. The owner is currently looking for a new singer, but who would come here? His colleague chuckled. Is it really that difficult? Gina inquired, washing off the soapy foam from the plate. It's a matter of having a decent voice and appearance. After all, a singer has to perform on stage and be like a face of the restaurant. Gina remained silent, involuntarily recalling her conversation with Mrs. Goldstein. She doubted her vocal abilities, but after all, this was just an ordinary restaurant on the outskirts of the city, not the Academy of Arts, right? After her shift ended, she removed her gloves, tidied her hair, and headed straight for the manager's office. If you came for the money, you'll get paid at the end of the week. Lawrence glared at her. I know, but that's not what I want to talk about, Gina blurted out. Then what? Are you thinking of quitting after all? Then you won't get your paycheck. Consider it an unpaid internship. Take me on as a singer, she said, gathering her courage. Oh, really? Are you kidding at me? The manager shook his head. Just give me a chance. Oh, don't be ridiculous. It's as clear as day that you're not cut out for it. Lawrence's words seemed offensive to her. He had never even heard her sing, so he had no right to be so dismissive. Driven by some inner pulse, Gina took a deep breath and began to sing the song with which she had once won a contest. What are you doing? Lawrence wrinkled his nose with feigned displeasure, but Gina didn't stop, continuing to sing without a microphone or music. The words flowed from her soul, forming a beautiful and slightly melancholic melody. All right, I ought to admit that it was not bad. It'll do for a restaurant. Lawrence reluctantly agreed, amazed by the power of the dishwasher's voice. You see, you should have listened first before judging me, Gina said proudly. So you want to sing with us? Fine, muttered Lawrence, but I'll pay you as a dishwasher, and if you like, you can take home the dishes that the client refused. Only for the sake of your children, so they don't go hungry with a mother like you. It was clear that Gina's audacity had offended the manager, but he couldn't afford to not include her in the band, as the next performance was just 2 days away. Where else could he find a replacement? Thank you, Gina sincerely expressed her gratitude. At least it's some form of payment, better than nothing at all. The most important thing is to do what you love." Seeing her enthusiasm, Lawrence wrinkled his nose, displeased by the sight of his subordinate in good spirits. After a moment, however, a nasty smile appeared on his lips, as if he had thought of a way to further humiliate Gina. "Doing what you love, huh? Oh dear, I forgot to mention that you'll be singing with a phonogram." "What? Why?" "I'm good enough as I am," Gina said in shock. "I don't care about your abilities. All I want is to be sure that you don't mess up the performance." It was obvious that Lawrence was doing this intentionally, humiliating her by thinking too highly of herself. His gaze seemed to say, "Look, this is what you're really worth. You're only capable of pretending to be a singer." But even that was enough for Gina, unsophisticated by the gifts of fate. "The first performance is in 2 days, and if you mess up, you won't even get leftovers." It had been a month since Gina had been assigned to her new position. She continued to sing, never having the chance to show the audience her real voice. Lawrence never paid her promised money. She mostly survived on grocery trims and occasional handouts from particularly successful concerts. Gina knew he was just profiting from her, but she was not discouraged, especially since she got a real friend here. "Do you know who you are? You aren't a dishwasher. You are the real prima donna of this worthless diner," Ned smiled, adjusting his waiter's shirt. "Don't embarrass me. My show is in 20 minutes, and I can't have my voice shaking," Gina giggled. "By the way, this is for you." The young man elegantly pulled out a bouquet from behind his back and handed it over to Gina. "Thank you, but flowers are usually given after a performance." Gina thanked him, inhaling the sweet scent of blossoming buds. "I'm afraid I'll have too much work to do it after the show, so put them in the dressing room, and they will please you." Ned smiled. From the first days, the waiter tried to woo Gina by giving her small gifts and nice little things. He was a nice, sweet guy, but Gina couldn't bring herself to reciprocate. The betrayal of her ex-husband was too strong for her to open up to another man. "How's your grandma?" Gina asked, trying to change the subject. "She's fine. Moping, of course, but generally good. She gave up a lot after Mum died, even though it's been years. I don't think she'll ever fully recover." "Lucky you have her. Even though you didn't know your father, you still had a family," Gina said, clapping Ned on the shoulder in a friendly manner. Despite her wariness, she felt sympathy for the young man. However, she couldn't decide on anything more than friendship yet. "Hey, enough with the snot. Get your makeup on and get on stage," Lawrence shouted angrily, looking at them. "Can't you be more polite?" Ned frowned, instinctively shielding Gina with his shoulder. "Are you going to admonish me too? Would you like to lose your job?" The manager frowned menacingly. "Yelling at employees is a wrong and useless management tactic," Ned retorted. "That's okay, I'll run. The show is actually coming up." Gina intervened in their conflict, soothingly stroking Ned's back. "Don't talk too much here," snarled Lawrence angrily at Ned. The waiter gritted his teeth, but held back the rage that was bursting out. It was a pity to lose his job like this, at the whim of a reckless and arrogant boss. "It's just a shame that you're always insulting Gina, keeping her from opening up." Ned kept trying to get to the boss's conscience. "None of your business, Romeo. Go on, you'd better collect the plates," quipped the manager. Sighing heavily, Ned headed for the hall, where the stage was already in full swing, preparing for the performance. "I wish I could break all this stuff so she could sing in her own voice," muttered Ned, looking at the musicians setting up the equipment. Suddenly, his eyes fell upon a concert microphone, which everyone seemed to have forgotten about, placed on the edge of the stage. Obeying a spontaneous idea, Ned approached it and discreetly disconnected the device from the laptop, then hiding the cord under his apron. "Now we'll see how you set the phonogram to her," Ned grinned. An hour later, Lawrence was frantically rushing around the stage and yelling at Gina, "You fool, how could you lose it?" "What's it got to do with me? Actually, you sent me to the dressing room yourself, and I didn't touch anything," Gina squeaked, afraid to raise her eyes at her furious boss. "Well, what do we do now? How am I supposed to set the phonogram if we don't have a working microphone?" "You think the audience is stupid enough not to notice?" snarled the manager, hovering angrily over her. I can sing live," stuttered Gina with fear. "One more word and I'm gonna get your head blown off. Live." "Chief, the show's in 3 minutes. Are we coming out or what?" said one of the musicians. "Yes, we're coming out," Gina shouted in fear. She gathered her last strength to resist the tyrant, realizing that this was her last chance to prove her point. "All right, you guys play and entertain the people. As for you, Gina," Lawrence looked at the singer disparagingly, "if I see even a single dissatisfied guest, you'll immediately pack your bags and vanish, and also compensate me for the cost of the microphone." The spotlights flashed on the stage and the guests began to applaud, welcoming the musicians. "That's it, go! You'll only get one shot at this," Lawrence hissed angrily and then pushed Gina towards the stage. Finally, Gina got a chance to sing in her own voice. She no longer felt any excitement for the audience, only anger at the idiot boss and a desire to prove to him that she wasn't anything. "Hello, welcome to our show," she shouted. Her powerful voice reverberated off the ceiling wall, spreading enchanting notes throughout the hall. The musicians got into action, and along with the first chords, the words of the song started coming off the singer's lips. "That was wonderful!" exclaimed someone from the audience. "Encore! Bravo!" The audience applauded. An hour of the concert flew by unnoticed for all those gathered. Gina's real singing amazed the guests, and even she herself did not expect such a strong reaction. "Why haven't you sung like this before? Please don't put any more phonograms on." Gina bowed happily, sent the delighted crowd an air kiss and left the stage. "I'm so glad it worked out for you," Ned exclaimed, meeting her outside her dressing room. In joy, she rushed to hug the guy. He froze from happiness, and then also wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a moment, and then embarrassedly went to different directions. "Oh, I need to wash my makeup off," Gina fussed, embarrassed at her own impulse. "Yeah, I have work to do too." Ned left and Gina followed him with a look. The guy's embrace made her heart beat a little more often, and it became harder and harder to deny their growing sympathy every day. A few more weeks had passed since then. Gina's number of appearances increased. After all, every day more and more people wanted to get to the concert. Now she always sang only with her voice. And her fame slowly began to spread throughout the town. "No way!" Gina exclaimed in surprise, looking at her phone screen. "Look how many views that video of you singing has gotten," smiled Ned. Apparently, one of the guests had guessed to capture Gina's song on his phone and then posted the video on the internet. "You've definitely been noticed. The video has become very popular. People are sharing it with each other, and everyone is admiring it," the waiter continued. Gina inhaled happily, afraid to believe the best. "And, by the way, I contacted the author of the video and asked to leave your phone number in the description if someone wants to offer you a creative contract." "Come on, who needs me except our little town?" Gina brushed it off embarrassedly. Suddenly, her smartphone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced incredulously at the unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Gina answered breathlessly. "Gina, hello, my name is Kimberly. I'm a representative of a music company. Do you have a moment to speak?" "Of course." Not believing in what was happening, replied the singer. "Great. We'd like to offer you a job as a vocalist with us. You will need to move to the capital and sign a contract. All expenses will be covered, and all that is required of you is your beautiful voice. What do you think?" "Oh my God, of course. I agree." "Wonderful. In that case, please confirm your address. We'll send tickets. We look forward to your visit soon." The interlocutor disconnected, and Gina looked at Ned in disbelief. "Wow, the capital. Can you imagine?" she said admiringly, feeling her head start to spin. "Listen, why don't you think about it for a while?" Ned said with a serious look. He didn't seem to like the news about Gina's soon departure. Moreover, it even made him wary. "But it was your idea. You're the reason they got my number," Gina exclaimed. "It's just that it's really far away. I thought maybe one of the locals would want to hire you, or they'd call you on the radio. But the capital? Do you realize what kind of people are there? I think you're just jealous that someone's starting to admire me besides you." Gina angrily blurted out. "That's not the point," answered the guy. "They're all just thinking about ratings there. They don't care about human life, soul." "What the hell do you know about music? I believe in my success. Not without your help, by the way. However, it's a pity you end up being such a coward." "What about the children?" asked Ned, calming down. "They said they'll cover all the expenses. So, we're going to start a new life altogether. And you can stay in this swamp if you like it so much." "Gina, money can't buy happiness." "Of course I can't buy happiness. But ice cream? Yes. And clothes for the kids, and home improvements. My God, you can't imagine how tired I am of living impoverished, scrounging from paycheck to paycheck." Tears came to Gina's eyes. The drop of success gave hope to start a new life, to get rid of the shameful image of a lonely no-one-needs-a-mother and become a popular singer. It was a pity only that Ned, who always helped, this time turned out to be blind to her suffering. "I'm leaving anyway, with or without your approval." She threw to her friend and ran towards the exit. "Wait! I was just—" But Gina wasn't listening to anything anymore. "Kimberly? Well, is that woman from the video coming to us?" clarified the head of the music company to his assistant. "Of course, Mr. Klein. Where will she go?" she replied. "All right, get her a normal apartment. Give her some money for the first time. She isn't moving in with the children." "Yes, and I'm in shock. Isn't that many expenses?" "We've promised, of course, but who knew she had a whole brood of kids?" "It's okay. She'll bring us more money than we're spending now. The main thing is to slip the contract to her in such a way that she doesn't read it, and then we'll squeeze every drop out of her." Mr. Klein smiled. That same evening, the assistant went to the station to meet the future star. "Hello, it was me you spoke to on the phone." Kimberly smiled broadly when she saw Gina getting off the train. "Oh, hello. I'm sorry, I'm not alone. Kids, say hello." The cluster of 4 toddlers curled around Elaine and Gina, quieted for a moment, squeaked a greeting, and continued their fiddling. "Well, great. Load up the car and let's go to your new place." "Is the apartment really ready yet?" Gina wondered. "Sure. You just sign right here." Taking advantage of Gina's confusion, the assistant quickly opened a folder with papers in front of her and pointed to the right place with her finger. "It's all right there, isn't it?" Gina said with a little doubt. "Well, of course it is. What's the point of us deceiving you? We're going to cooperate." Without blinking an eye, the assistant lied. After getting the signature, she slammed the folder shut. The radiant smile immediately dissolved, giving way to a businesslike cliffhanger. "Okay, well, check in today, and then we're off to record the song tomorrow." So fast? I thought they'd give me at least a couple of days to recover, get settled in after the move. Gina was surprised. Sweetie, you're no longer in your village, but in the big city. A couple of days here is money. Money that nobody's going to lose for nothing. So come on, gather your things and be at the studio at 7 tomorrow. I'll text you the address. That's it. Hey, let's work, came from the loudspeaker in the studio. Give me a break, Gina pleaded, finishing another recording. While you're resting, the competitors are working like crazy. And look at their ratings. You can only dream of such now, the producer angrily reprimanded. My throat is already sore. Spare my vocal cords. Damn it. Okay, you have 5 minutes. Gina, with a heavy sigh, took off her headphones and sat down in the chair prepared by the assistants. Are you okay? Whispered makeup artist Christina, whom they had become friends with during the long preparations for the performance. Life in the capital is not easy, Gina sighed, as she put her face under the cosmetic brush. Simultaneously with the recording, she had a photo shoot for Star at Work, so today the singer had to sing well and look irresistible. I understand. I don't have days off either, Christina nodded. Everything that initially seemed like a fairy tale quickly faded away. That damn contract! If I had known, I never would have signed it, snorted Gina. The conditions are inhuman. I hardly see my children. Sometimes we work 20 hours in a row. I'm wearing myself out. And for what? What's it all for? You have to pay for popularity, sighed Christina. Yeah, but for some reason I'm the one paying, and others are making money. Are you ready? Came the voice of the producer, who burst into the dressing room, meticulously examining the makeup that was applied. Mr. Klein, maybe that's enough for today. I'm tired, sobbed Gina. Everyone is tired, including me. Who has it easy now? Snorted the producer. But I feel myself like a slave. That's exactly what you are, a slave of show business. The man grinned angrily. Did you sign the contract? Yes, you did. Do you get paid? Yes, you do. And if you want to quit, pay the penalty and leave. Gina only sighed sadly and looked down. She realized that the choice voiced by her producer was just an illusion, and in reality there was nothing she could do. What don't you like? Saying this, the man loomed over the singer. He took her chin and forced her to look into his eyes. You will work as much as I say. Is that clear? Who are you? A mere singer from 1,000 around here? So keep your mouth shut and be grateful for having a job. The recording ended 4 hours later, with Gina feeling completely exhausted. Now she even remembered her work at the restaurant with some nostalgia, where she had at least some days off. Almost home, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Hi, came Ned's voice from the speaker. Ned, I'm so happy to hear from you, and I'm sorry, I was so stupid. Gina exhaled. It's okay. How are you doing? Ned, everything is bad. You were right. It's just hell. Moving here was a mistake. More precisely, I shouldn't have trusted this studio so easily. To them, I'm just a money-making tool, which they discard as soon as the batteries run out. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. The former colleague tried to encourage her, as always. What is there to figure out? Do you know the penalties for breaking the contract? You know, I'm strong in spirit, so don't worry, we'll get through this. I'll be there soon and try to sort it out. A week later, Ned burst into Mr. Klein's office. You can't exploit her like this. It's inhuman, he shouted. Who is this, anyway? Raised the producer's eyebrow, glancing at Kimberly, who was standing behind the uninvited guest. Either the fiancé or the lover of our Gina. I still don't understand. The assistant shrugged. I came here specifically
to find out what gives you the right to exploit her talent like this. You don't let her see her children, and I'm sure you're playing games with the payments," said Ned. "So, dear groom, nobody forced your Gina to come here. She signed the contract herself. She receives a steady monthly income. How much is left for me is none of your business. You know, a lot of money goes into organization, cosmetics, flights and housing too." "You're all crooks. I've seen enough of you in my life," Ned said with disgust. "Anyway, I don't have time to listen to this nonsense." Mr. Klein waved his hand. Obeying his gesture, the guards, whom Kimberly had called in advance, dragged Ned out of the office. "Don't touch me. I have not finished speaking." "Settle down," phlegmatically threw one of the burly men, dragging Ned down the corridor. "You think I can't get a handle on you? I'll go to the police." Ned exhaled, muffled, hanging on the guard's arms. "I'll have you locked up for beating." "Beating, you say? Is that beating?" muttered the second guard skeptically. "Do you think we should show him what a real beating is?" His partner smiled with a vicious smile. "Well, since he's going to the police anyway, at least let him complain about a real beating." Nodding to each other, the security dragged Ned into a darkened den. They threw him against the opposite wall, making him knock over a small table along the way. "And what, are you going to torture me?" Ned hissed, feeling his battered sides aching. "Yes." Without another word, the guards began to beat the guy, trying their best to hurt him. At first, Ned still resisted, trying to at least cover his head with his hands. But soon the strength was no longer even enough for that. His mouth was full of the glandular taste of blood, and his consciousness gradually began to fade. "That's enough," came the voice of one of the guards. "Yeah, we'll dump him somewhere in a back alley." "Well, well, be careful with him," came a new voice. Ned jerked, but immediately experienced a new attack of pain, and then quietly groaned. Barely opening his eyes, he noticed people in white coats and a bright lamp pointed directly at his face. "Oh, he's awake. And you said he wouldn't," said one of the orderlies cheerfully. "Where did he even come from?" said the elderly doctor perplexedly, looking at the terrible beatings. "Oh, he must have quarrelled with someone at the club. They found him in an alley. An elderly man was going to the store, saw him, so he called an ambulance." "All right, let's get him on the table and patch him up quickly but properly," he said to the surgeon and started working. "Where am I?" Ned woke up after the operation. "In the hospital, young man. Trauma department." The doctor greeted him. 4 hours we treated you, to fix everything your abusers had done. Thank God, no major traumas. Tell me your name. Where are you from and what happened?" Ned introduced himself, and when he named the town he had come from, the elderly surgeon was overjoyed. It turned out that he himself was from that town. "Nice to hear." The waiter wanted to get up, but immediately coughed from the pain in his battered limbs. Lie down, you need to rest now. You're my countryman, and it's a matter of honour to help you. Therefore, tell me what happened." The doctor immediately calmed him down. "It doesn't make any difference. You'd think you could help. There's too many big people involved in this. It's best not to even get involved." Ned became sad again, remembering the real reason for his visit to the hospital. "Don't look at me like at an ordinary physician. Actually, I also have connections and some influence. So spit it out." "Where would a doctor get connections?" Ned skeptically remarked. "Well, we save all kinds of people, and some of them leave business cards ready to help in gratitude for their saved health. So, come on, maybe we'll punish your abuser." "I'm okay, but they're holding a woman almost in slavery. She's got a voice like an angel, and those bastards make her work like a damned. She can't see the light of day, and they won't let her near her children." "Is she your bride?" The doctor nodded understandingly. "Not yet, but I love her more than life. I'd do anything to save her." "All right, hero. I can see that you'll rush into fire and water to rescue her. I'll help you, but get some rest. I have a couple of calls to make." "Mr. Klein, there are some serious people here to see you." Kimberly ran fearfully into the office. "What's the matter?" The producer jumped up from his chair. They... But the assistant did not have time to finish her sentence. A respectable gentleman in an expensive suit entered the office, followed by two tough guys. "To what do I owe your visit?" Mr. Klein said dryly, noticing the serious guests at once. "Why, sit down, there's no need to be nervous." The guest smiled dazzlingly. "My name is Mr. Anderson. I'm a lawyer and a representative of the company." He silently held out a business card, making the producer literally turn pale after reading the name. "Really?" Mr. Klein said quietly. Yes, that's us." "What business brings such dear guests to my humble abode?" Mr. Klein subserviently snickered. "We want you to terminate the contract of one of your singers so that she won't have to pay a penalty." "What? I don't know that you deal with singers," Mr. Klein said in surprise. "And that's none of your business." The lawyer flashed his perfect smile again. "My client, I emphasize, insistently asks you to let Gina go and never remember of her existence again. Is that clear?" Mr. Klein only nodded, wiping away the cold sweat that appeared on his forehead. "And yes, if the girl's reputation is damaged or discredited in any way—" "Oh, don't worry. I understand all that. No claims. I've already forgotten she exists." "Fine. Remember, I will see to the termination of your contract with her, and if you try to cheat—" Mr. Anderson didn't finish his sentence, only brushed a non-existent speck of dust off his shoulder, got up from his chair, and headed for the door. "Mr. Klein," he suddenly spoke up, having already practically left the office. "What?" asked the producer nervously. "The termination papers must be ready by this evening." The serious men finally left Mr. Klein's office, closing the door softly behind them. In the silence that hung, even the ticking of the hands of the clock seemed to be a drumbeat. "She's our favourite singer, the main earnings, the concerts, all tied up with her," whispered Kimberly. "Do you think I don't know that, without you?" Mr. Klein bellowed, making her wince. "Didn't you see who it was? Do you think such people are refused?" "How on earth did that beggar woman get such connections?" exclaimed the assistant. "What does it matter? Sit down at once to prepare the documents, and make sure you don't mess up anywhere, or you'll be skinned. Got it?" That evening, Gina sat by Ned's bedside. "I just can't believe they gave up so easily," muttered Gina, hanging up the phone. "What?" Ned called back from his bunk. "I just got a phone call from the producer. They're giving up all claims and cancelling the contract. But I really don't understand why they changed their mind." "That's a great idea," exclaimed Ned cheerfully. "And I'm pretty sure my doctor had a hand in it." "I don't understand anything. An unfamiliar man called me this morning, said you're in the hospital. I rushed over, and here it is." "Yes, that was him, probably. Imagine, it turns out he grew up in the same town as me, and he turned out to be a great man. See, he even helped you." "You don't know how happy I am," said Gina, sobbing on impulse, and hugged Ned gently, trying not to hurt him. "It's because you weren't afraid to get involved in all this, even though I talked you out of it." "Come on, what's the big deal?" But she didn't let her saviour finish speaking. Gina leaned over his face and kissed him directly on the lips, finally managing to overcome her inner fear of her new love. "Does that really mean you agree to be my girlfriend?" The guy smiled as they finished hugging. "Of course," Gina said, embarrassed. "Why would you ask something like that? my little dummy. I'm so glad. Only you should realize that I can't leave the kids, and we'll always be together, she muttered anxiously. Trust me, I'm not scared of your kids. I'm practically used to them already, Ned nodded confidently. You'll move in with me right after you're discharged. The studio promised to keep the apartment. There's plenty of space there, enough for everyone, said Gina, happily squeezing her eyes shut. Okay, and by the way, I found a new producer on the way here. Gina immediately froze, wary of that dreaded word. No, don't worry, he's a good man. I can smell the type right away. He promised to help. He promised to find a good studio where they'll take your interests into account, where they won't overwork you. Are you sure we can trust him? My surgeon's friend has already checked him out and he says he's decent. So I can keep a solo career, Gina said thoughtfully. Of course, everyone already knows you. People will buy tickets and you'll be able to set your own tour schedule and get paid fairly. That's great! The couple hugged again, enjoying each other's closeness. It seemed like there was no one happier in the whole world right now. Hello, young people, came the cheerful voice of Dr. White. I see our hero is on the mend. Yes, I feel better. Thank you, Dr. White, sincerely thanked Ned. Oh, it's just a couple of phone calls, waved his hand at the doctor. People should help each other, especially those who are in trouble. Thank you, Dr. White, Gina thanked him sincerely. In fact, I don't know how I would be without you. You've become a saviour angel to me. Everyone laughed, and it was a laugh of happiness and joy. A week later, Ned was discharged from the hospital, and Gina came to pick him up and take him to her home. Dr. White often visited them, and Gina's children were always delighted to see him because he always brought them treats and gifts. After some time, Gina and Ned got married. Gina's career developed. Her new producer turned out to be a good man who really cared for her. Ned became a reliable support for Gina, taking care of the house, the children, and Gina herself. As for Gina, she was not spoiled by popularity. She remained the same kind and generous woman, never forgetting all the people who had helped her get out of the difficult times in her life.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sara tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sara y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sara quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sara completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sara se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sara quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sara era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Thyssen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber. Los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Thyssen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sara había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sara llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sara era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sara comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, Pren, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre Pren antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Thyssen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Thyssen, primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometí hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara, y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por 3ª vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su 2ª botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso, que el ascensor se detuviera en el 3er piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al 7º piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de 1 hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación, todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos dos objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del Listen. ¿Ion? Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Ion, lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche. Me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado. Dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones. Intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre. Aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente. Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales. 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco. Parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas. Había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos. Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche. No había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta. Los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado. Rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse. No hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marche Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshall no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sara. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sara era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sara, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba, y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marche. Malcolm Eugene Foote resistió al principio, pero David y Marche lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sarah conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.